Hi, my name is Clare Hacksel, and I am so proud to be the NDP candidate here in Toronto Danforth. Yeah. We are meeting today on the traditional territories of the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Huron-Wendat, the Chippewa, and many Indigenous people who still make this land their home, including First Nations, Inuit, and Métis. Toronto is also covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas of the Credit. As we gather, it is important to remember that reconciliation is not just about words, but it must also be about action. And that's why the NDP is committed to partnerships with our Indigenous communities so that all generations can thrive. We're here to talk about healthcare, and there is a crisis. So many Canadian families are waiting in emergency rooms across the country for care they desperately need. Just last year, I sat with my husband for 31 hours as he waited to be admitted to a hospital here in Toronto. I work as a midwife, and every day I stand shoulder to shoulder with extraordinary nurses providing exceptional care, but they are at their breaking point. There is simply not enough nurses in our system, and they are tired. Thankfully, the NDP has a solution. We have a fix. We are going to hire more nurses. We are going to improve the working conditions for nurses, and we are going to rebuild our public healthcare system. Because if we don't improve the material conditions for nurses, we can't improve our healthcare system.
That's right.
That's why I'm so glad to be here today to introduce someone who is a fighter for regular working people all across this city and has been fighting for public services. I'm so pleased to introduce a leader, President Charlene Nero of LiUNA Local 3000.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Claire. Good morning, everyone. My name is Charlene Nero. I'm the president of LiUNA 3000. We represent thousands of healthcare and community service workers across this country in 4 different provinces. We know that our members show up for work to make things better for everyday working folks and families all across this country. At 150 workplaces, our members know that healthcare is a team effort. It's an effort that involves RNs and RPNs and PSWs and porters and community workers and all of the community services that support them. Today, I'm proud to stand here with Jagmeet and declare that we support the NDP because they are the only party that truly understands that. They are the only party in this election that is fighting privatization, taking a hard line and saying it's the federal government's job to do something to make our lives better and to protect our healthcare system. Right now, healthcare workers are stretched thin, all of them, registered technologists, nurses, everyone in every facet, from retirement homes to high care hospitals. They're seeing emergency rooms closing, we're seeing services closed down, we're seeing services privatized.
Shame.
It is frustrating and frankly disappointing that this is not even going to be a subject of concern at the leaders' debate. Only the NDP is making healthcare the issue that it is for Canadians, and we need to elect as many NDP members of Parliament as we can to ensure that healthcare workers are appreciated as more than just numbers on a spreadsheet, as more than a chip in bargaining. They deserve safe, healthy working conditions because the NDP understand that somebody has to be there to care for the caregivers, and that's why we need their voice. That's why we need their voice in their parliament. Healthcare workers and community service workers are proud to stand with Jagmeet Singh and the NDP because he's proud to stand here with us.
Absolutely.
The other leaders are not making these types of announcements, but together We can fight for the healthcare system that we deserve. Together we will.
That's right.
Together we will return as many NDPs to Parliament as we can, and we will keep Canada, the great country that it is, and maintain our critical social services. Thank you to everybody for being here. Claire, I'll hand it back to you.
Thank you. Wow, thank you so much. That was awesome.
Wow. Charlene, thank you so much for everything you do for lifting up workers all across the city. It's now my pleasure to introduce someone who knows firsthand what it's like to work on the front lines of healthcare system. She's an emergency department nurse, a proud union activist, and a strong advocate for the public health care. Please join me in welcoming Grace Pierias from the Ontario Nurses Association.
Thank you so much for having me. Good morning. My name is Grace Pierias, and I am a registered nurse in the Ontario Nurses Association. We represent 68,000 registered nurses and healthcare professionals across the province. We also represent 18,000 nursing student affiliates who are the future of healthcare. We are proud to support this important announcement today and provide new federal funding to hire more nurses and require provinces to implement safe staffing ratios. Yep. That's right. It's no secret that in Ontario we are in the midst of a healthcare understaffing crisis. This is also the case across the country. Understaffing is a direct result of underfunding and privatization from provincial and federal governments. As a result, nurses and healthcare professionals are struggling with an endless cycle of understaffing, violence, and burnout, and it's causing them to leave their professions. When there are not enough nurses, patients don't get the life-saving care that they need and deserve. It means longer waits in the hospital, service cuts, emergency department chaos, and ongoing closures. We have heard from nurses working in ICU, intensive care units, with the seriously ill patients who would normally provide care in a 1-to-1 nurse ratio and are now caring for up to 5 or more patients at once. Yep. This is a crisis like we have never seen before. It is hurting patients and nurses alike. We believe in a healthcare system where everyone has access to timely, high-quality public care. We know that fully funding public health care and implementing these safe staffing ratios is how we make this a reality. I want to thank Jagmeet and the NDP for this crucial policy commitment today and for making healthcare a top issue in this election. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Grace, and for sharing your story and everything you do for nurses and our healthcare system. Now I want to introduce a fighter, someone who never steps back, never backs down from a fight, and is here protecting our healthcare system, leader of Canada's New Democrats, Jagmeet Singh.
Thank you so much. I'm so honored to be here. Big thank you to Claire, our candidate here in Toronto Danforth. Amazing. And to the nurses, sharing your stories and your support means the world to me. Canadians are really worried about the threats to our country from Donald Trump. And they're also seeing that Donald Trump has had our healthcare system in his target. Back when we first negotiated CUSMA, he targeted medication prices and wanted to jack up prices to allow American pharmaceutical companies to make more profits off Canadians. And we fought back against that. But we know he's got his targets on healthcare in Canada. And so a part of the fight back and saying, no, we don't want to be the 51st state. We want to defend who we are as a country is defending the values that we care about. And one of those values is that we take care of each other. And what represents that value is universal health care. Universal public health care is one of the things that Canadians are so proud of. When you think about being Canadian, you think about we take care of each other. We got a healthcare system that's there for you or your loved ones when you need it. But at the same time, we know that our healthcare system is in a crisis right now. We all have stories of going to an emergency room and waiting for hours and hours and wondering what's going to happen, wondering when you're going to get the care you need, having a loved one, maybe your child in your arms, coughing or crying, and just waiting so long to get care. You've heard stories of seniors waiting to get care and surgeries. The wait times and the delays are really hurting our healthcare system. And we know that our frontline healthcare workers are doing everything that they can. They're amazing. They're working so hard, but they cannot deal with an impossible situation where there's just simply not enough healthcare workers. We're up against a crisis in our healthcare, and that crisis is a shortage of healthcare workers. It's all workers, but particularly nurses. And so we have a commitment today to defend our healthcare system. As was mentioned, we have made this a priority throughout the campaign. For us, healthcare is fundamental. It's who we are as Canadians. And at the federal level, we should be talking about it. It should be an item in the debate. And even though it's not right now, I'm going to bring it up in the debate. I'm going to challenge the other leaders on healthcare and their healthcare commitments, because only New Democrats have shown you again and again we are committed to defending this system, to keeping it public and universal, and expanding it and improving it. And so what do we need to do now to fight back against the threats to our healthcare system and the crisis that we're in? We need to hire more workers. And today I want to talk about how we need to hire more nurses specifically. So our plan is to hire 35,000 new nurses between now and 2030. We need to hire more nurses. But that's not enough. We don't just need to hire new nurses. We need to respect and retain the nurses we have. And one of the ways to do that was mentioned. We are committing to ensuring that there is an appropriate ratio between nurses and patients. Nurses want to provide the best care possible, the care that they were trained to do. But they cannot do that if the ratios are not appropriately set. How can a nurse provide the care, the life-saving care, the high-quality care, if they just don't have enough nurses to provide the right ratio? So we need the right ratios. We also know the conditions of work are directly related to the conditions of care. We have good work conditions, safe work conditions, appropriate nurse-patient ratios, and nurses are properly compensated, properly supported for the work they do. We have good outcomes in our healthcare system. And that's what we believe in. So we want to support nurses. We want to make sure they're properly paid. We also know that agency nursing is causing a big concern in our country. Agency nursing is setting up a two-tier system. And I don't blame nurses for this. These are for-profit companies that are offering higher pay. But why don't we just pay nurses more in the public system? That's what we should be doing. And so we've seen the Manitoba NDP take some really strong steps towards tackling this problem of agency nursing. We want to properly compensate. Nurses should get good pay and good work conditions for the work they're doing. And so we can do that. When we spend money on agency nursing, which is total about $1.5 billion over the past year, in 1 year alone, $1.5 billion, we know that that money is going to lining the pockets of a for-profit company. Instead, we could hire more nurses and pay them more. That's what we should be doing. And that's what Canadians expect of us. In addition, we have a plan around recruitment. There are a lot of internationally trained nurses that are in our country. We need to streamline the path for them to be recognized for their work and to be able to get qualified. We also know a lot of American nurses are looking at Canada and saying, maybe I want to work in America. Come on over. We welcome you here, and we're going to streamline the path for you to become nurses here in Canada. We also want to acknowledge the hard work of nurses and PSWs with a tax credit specifically to acknowledge their hard work, a $5,000 non-refundable tax credit. That's just a way of saying thank you, we appreciate you, and you matter. And so I think that's just one important additional thing. Ultimately, we know we need to recruit more, we need to retain the workers we have, we need to respect them better, and we can do that. We spend billions of dollars in healthcare transfers. Let's make a condition of those transfers that we have appropriate levels between nurse-patient ratio, that we have good pay for these nurses, and we hire enough nurses. We're going to tie healthcare funding to provinces that actually deliver on these priorities. And finally, I look at the other parties and see what they're offering around healthcare. Where Pierre Poilievre and the Conservatives have been very clear. They want to cut healthcare. They want to privatize it, make it more American. And it is shameful. That's not what Canadians want. And I think that's why more and more Canadians are starting to reject the Conservative message. They're saying cutting our healthcare system is not what we need to do. Cutting investments in something that's so important to Canadians, makes us proud to be Canadian, is the wrong thing. It's wrong for my family, it's wrong for me, and it's wrong for our country. So we're seeing more and more Canadians reject that. But Canadians are taking a hard look at Mark Carney now and are noticing he's talking a lot about cutting as well. In fact, Liberals themselves have mentioned, longtime Liberals, that Mark Carney's plan will require massive cuts to achieve. In fact, we've tallied up the cuts that he's proposing, and it's going to be $43 billion in cuts. What does that mean? How much is that going to cut from our healthcare system? Will he be cutting nurses? Will he be cutting frontline healthcare workers? These are the questions I'm going to ask him in the debate, because he can't get away with saying that he's going to cut massively without New Democrats standing up and saying, no, we're never going to let that happen. Not on our watch. We're going to fight back and defend our healthcare system. And so I ask Canadians right now, especially here in the city of Toronto, Torontonians, if you want someone that's going to stand up for you and your family, that's going to fight to defend our healthcare system and improve it and fix the problems in this crisis, vote for a New Democrat. If you want someone that's going to say, no matter what, I'm never going to let healthcare be on the negotiating table with Donald Trump and the Americans, then vote for a New Democrat. If you want someone in Ottawa that's going to fight to defend our healthcare system against the cuts proposed by Mark Carney, vote for a New Democrat. It's because Canadians voted for New Democrats that we've achieved so much. Our universal health care was only possible because Canadians voted for New Democrats and sent Tommy Douglas to Ottawa, and he brought in universal health care. Yep. And because you voted for us and sent 25 of us to Ottawa, we were able to bring in dental care and the first steps on farming care. So if you want New Democrats to be in Ottawa to fight for you, you got to vote for them. And here in Toronto, vote for your New Democrat candidate. Here in Toronto, Danforth, vote for Clare Hacksel. That's someone that's going to fight for you and stand up for you. I'll do that again in French, and then I look forward to your questions. Donc, on sait qu'il y a beaucoup d'incertitudes causées par la chaos de M. Trump. On sait qu'il aussi cible notre système de santé. Il attaque notre pays, mais aussi il cible notre système de santé. Il pense qu'il peut faire plus de profits sur notre système de santé, donc il veut la privatiser. Et on doit défendre notre pays. Et une fierté des Canadiens et Canadiennes, une fierté des Québécois et Québécois, c'est notre système de santé public et universel. C'est quelque chose qu'on pense que c'est quelque chose qui représente nos valeurs. La valeur de on prend soin les uns des autres et on fait ça avec un système de santé qui est gratuit, qui est universel, qui est public. Mais notre système de santé clairement est dans une crise maintenant. C'est une crise nationale. Partout au pays, on voit que notre système de santé est dans une situation tellement difficile. Et une grande raison pour laquelle on se retrouve dans cette situation, c'est parce qu'il y a un grand manque de travailleurs dans le système de santé, tous les travailleurs, mais particulièrement un manque des infirmières. Donc notre engagement, parce que les néo-démocrates veulent défendre notre système de santé, c'est notre engagement, c'est on va embaucher 35 000 infirmières ici à 2030. Et notre plan, ce n'est pas seulement d'embaucher des nouveaux infirmières, on doit garder les infirmières qu'on a, et ça veut dire on doit les respecter, on doit une rémunération pour ces travailleurs, et on doit avoir un ratio entre les infirmières et les patients qui est le bon ratio. Les conditions de travail sont tellement liées avec les conditions de soins. Les deux sont connectés. Et pour les néo-démocrates, on comprend ça. Ça, c'est pourquoi on va respecter les travailleurs, on va respecter les infirmières. On doit aussi recruter des nouveaux infirmiers. On sait qu'il y a plusieurs personnes qui ont de la formation internationale ici au Canada. Donc, on doit rendre plus facile le processus pour devenir une infirmière ici au Canada. On a des solutions, mais ça prend une volonté de défendre notre système de santé. Et ça, c'est la volonté d'NPD. On est là pour vous. On n'est pas là pour défendre les PDG, on est là pour défendre vos intérêts. Et vos intérêts dans les soins de santé, c'est un système de santé qui est universel et public, et on va respecter les travailleurs pour obtenir ce but. Mais c'est quoi le plan des autres chefs? Mark Carney et Pierre Poilievre. Pierre Poilievre parle des coupures massives dans le système de santé. Il veut couper les investissements, il veut couper les transferts. Il va couper dans les soins de santé et ça va vous coûter cher. Et les Canadiens, de plus en plus, commencent à rejeter cette approche. Ils pensent que ce n'est pas bon pour ma famille, ce n'est pas bon pour mon pays. Donc, c'est bon de voir ça. Mais en même temps, à ce moment, les gens regardent Mark Carney et pensent, il parle aussi beaucoup des coupures. Et on a analysé ses promesses et son plan va dire en coupure de 43 milliards de dollars. Ça, c'est une coupure massive. Donc, qu'est-ce qu'il va couper? Les soins de santé, les travailleurs de santé, les infirmières. Donc, malgré le fait que dans les débats, ce n'est pas un sujet, la santé, je vais soulever ce sujet. Je vais directement interpeller M. Carney et M. Poilievre sur ces plans de couper notre système de santé. Et je veux dire, c'est la mauvaise chose à faire. Si vous voulez quelqu'un qui va défendre notre système de santé, votez pour l'NPD. Réélire les députés sortants et élisez plus des néo-démocrates. On sait que l'Ottawa fonctionne mieux quand un parti n'a pas tout le pouvoir. Et Ottawa fonctionne mieux quand on a des néo-démocrates forts à Ottawa. Donc, votez pour l'NPD. Le fait que vous avez voté pour nous, ça nous a donné le pouvoir, nous avons donné le pouvoir de forcer le gouvernement de mettre en œuvre les soins dentaires. Donc, c'est grâce à vos efforts, grâce à votre appui. Donc, pour l'avenir, dans cette élection, votez pour l'NPD si vous voulez quelqu'un qui va défendre votre système de santé ici à Toronto-Danforth. Votez pour Clare Hacksel. À travers le pays, votez pour les néo-démocrates. Merci beaucoup. Thank you so much.
Merci beaucoup. Nous allons maintenant passer à la période de questions des journalistes. Une question et une relance par journaliste. We'll now take the questions from the press. One question, one follow-up, and we'll start with Olivia Stefanovic from CBC.
Good morning, Mr. Singh. Would you ever consider using the notwithstanding clause to override charter rights, and if so, for what purpose?
No, I think it's wrong to do so. I think we should not be using the notwithstanding clause. And I'm concerned, and I mentioned this before, I'm concerned with the fact that it's being used more and more. Charter rights, human rights should not be things that we are willing to ignore or put to the side. And I'm worried that it's becoming more and more commonplace that the notwithstanding clause is being used. Non, je ne vais pas jamais utiliser la clause dérogatoire parce que je crois profondément dans le droit de la personne, dans la charte des droits. Ce sont des droits importants et on doit les défendre et on ne doit pas les briser.
In your interviews this morning, you were asked whether you would stay on as party leader if your party loses status after the federal election, and you didn't give a clear answer. Are we to take that as a no, that you will be stepping aside as leader of the federal NDP if your party does not achieve federal party status?
No, I'm not worried about that. I'm focused on the election in front of me. And I said that earlier today. That's not my focus. My focus is we've got 2 weeks left of this election. We've got debates coming up very soon. And I want Canadians to know the choice that they have in this election. The choice is you got Pierre Poilievre who wants to cut the things you need. You got Mark Carney who's also proposing massive cuts to our healthcare. And you got New Democrats who want to defend it. So if you want someone that's going to defend our healthcare, vote for a New Democrat.
Thank you. La prochaine question, Valérie Gamache, Radio-Canada.
Monsieur Singh, je veux revenir sur la clause de dérogation, parce que M. Poilievre, ce qu'il propose ce matin, c'est de l'utiliser pour rétablir les peines consécutives pour des meurtriers qui auraient commis plusieurs meurtres. Est-ce que, selon vous, il faut quand même durcir le ton là, envers ces meurtriers qui tuent plusieurs personnes? Il donne l'exemple, par exemple, d'Alexandre Bissonnette là, à la Mosquée de Québec.
Avec le système de justice criminelle, je pense que les juges ont le pouvoir, ont la capacité de mettre en œuvre des pénalties sévères et c'est important de faire ça. Ma priorité, ça c'est horrible, les gens qui tuent les personnes, donc on doit avoir des pénalités sévères pour ces personnes. En général, notre approche par rapport au crime dans notre pays, c'est d'essayer de prévenir le crime avant qu'il se passe. Ça, c'est pourquoi on parle d'avoir plus des officiers sur les frontières pour défendre notre pays, pour arrêter les armes illégales, les drogues illégales qui traversent la frontière. Donc, ça, c'est notre priorité. Comment on peut arrêter les crimes avant qu'ils se passent.
Et vous en avez parlé vous-même, la santé ne fait pas partie des thèmes des débats cette semaine. Est-ce que ça vous coupe l'herbe sous le pied? Parce que c'est l'essentiel de votre campagne quand même, ce thème-là.
Je pense que, pas pour moi, c'est une question des priorités pour les Canadiens et Canadiennes, pour les Québécois et Québécoises. La santé, c'est une priorité. Donc, je pense que c'est la mauvaise chose à faire de ne pas inclure la santé dans les débats comme un thème. Mais je vais soulever la question de santé pendant les débats. Je vais interpeller les autres chefs aussi sur ces plans de couper en santé, parce que je pense que c'est mauvais. Et les gens doivent savoir c'est quoi les plans des autres chefs, comment ils vont couper, combien ils vont couper, comment ils vont couper. Donc, pour moi, c'est clair, on doit investir davantage dans notre système de santé, on doit les défendre, c'est une valeur canadienne, c'est une valeur québécoise, et les néo-démocrates vont les défendre.
Debate, please.
Sure. I think it's not about me and whether it's helpful or hurtful to me in the debate. I think it's wrong that healthcare, which is a major priority for Canadians, is not in the debate because Canadians think it's important, all right? It should be in there. And we know that given particularly the threats to our country, Canadians are really starting to examine what is it that makes us Canadian? What are we proud of as Canadians? And one of the things that comes up again and again is our healthcare system. It's a source of pride. People are proud that we have a universal public healthcare system, but they're also worried, deeply worried that it's in crisis right now. And so while it's not a theme in the debates, I will be bringing it up. I will be challenging the other leaders on their plans to cut healthcare at a time when we need to invest in it and strengthen it. And I will challenge both Mark Carney and Pierre Poilievre on their plans to cut. And if you want someone that's going to defend healthcare, vote for a New Democrat.
Thank you. Next question, Abigail Beeman, CTV.
After people were spotted at conservative rallies wearing shirts and holding signs that said, "Do you believe the polls?" reporters asked Mr. Poilievre if he believed the polls. And I thought it was interesting that this morning in 2 interviews you said twice that you thought polling wasn't accurately capturing NDP support. So do you believe the polls?
Yeah, and so, I mean, there's a conservative approach which is kind of gives you a little bit of like, they're not going to accept the outcome of the election. I will absolutely accept the outcome of the election. Without a doubt, I support democracy. It's in our party's name. 100% will accept whatever the outcomes are. But I was pointing out, rightly so, that polling doesn't seem to capture New Democrat support as well as other parties, because very recently, just a couple of months ago, we had a winter election in Ontario, and it was said that New Democrats would lose party status, that the leader would lose their seat, and that didn't happen. In fact, the leader won their seat. Marcell's won her seat in a resounding way, and New Democrats were able to hold on to official opposition. So I'm pointing out specifically that for some reason polling doesn't seem to capture New Democrat support very well. Many of the major polls, really credible ones, had New Democrats losing party status, and we did the opposite. We actually had official opposition. So pointing to that concrete example is what I'm talking about. Please don't confuse me with conservatives who are suggesting that they're not going to support or accept the outcome of the election. I will accept whatever the outcome of the election is.
Yesterday in Timmins, your outgoing MP, Carol Hughes, told us twice actually that she considers Donald Trump to be performing foreign interference in our Canadian election. Do you agree?
I mean, what he's doing is threatening our country. He's threatening our sovereignty. He's threatening us with economic pressure like he threatened to do, like he said he would do. And I think that's a serious concern. There are real concerns about foreign interference in our country, and the public inquiry talked about specifically China, India, and we also know that Iran is engaged in foreign interference. Canadians need to know that we're going to do everything possible to keep them free from foreign interference. No one should be living in fear in our country that just by exercising their democratic rights to critique other countries or raise their concerns, that should somehow result in them being harassed or intimidated. That should never happen. And my commitment is to make sure I do everything possible to defend Canadians.
Thank you. La prochaine question, Étienne Fortin-Gauthier, Nouveau Info.
Bon matin, M. Singh, vous allez bien? Oui, là, en 2021, lors des dernières élections à Toronto, dans plusieurs des circonscriptions, votre parti a eu 20-30% du vote, vous arriviez deuxième. Là, quand on parle aux gens qui ont voté pour vous lors du dernier scrutin, ils disent, là, je ne voterai plus NPD. Hein, je me tourne vers les libéraux dans bien des cas. Comment vous expliquez que même vos partisans de la dernière élection vous tournent le dos?
Je pense qu'on a maintenant 2 semaines, on a 2 débats qui s'en viennent bientôt et on peut partager notre message. Pour les gens qui ont peur de Donald Trump, je pense que cette question a changé, la question dans cette élection. Mais de plus en plus, je regarde et je note les gens rejettent les coupures conservatrices de Pierre Poilievre. Et son approche, les gens pensent que ce n'est pas bon pour le pays. Mais de plus en plus, les gens commencent à regarder Mark Carney et pensent, oui, il aussi parle des coupures. Et son plan va dire une coupure de 43 milliards de dollars. Même les libéraux, comme Karina Gould, a mentionné que le plan de Mark Carney, ça veut dire des coupures massives dans les soins de santé, dans les services dont vous avez besoin. Donc, pour ces gens qui ont peur des coupures des Mark Carney dans notre système de santé, je vous encourage de voter pour l'NPD parce qu'on est le seul parti qui va défendre contre ces coupures. Donc, ici à Toronto, si vous voulez un député qui va défendre le système de santé public et universel, votez pour l'NPD.
Mais on dit que votre message ne passe pas. Vous attaquez les sondages, vous dites que les sondages ne sont peut-être pas justes, mais pourquoi même les électeurs progressistes de Toronto qui votent NPD souvent au provincial ne vous font pas confiance là, à Toronto?
Je pense qu'on a, comme j'ai dit, on a 2 semaines pour continuer ce message et on a 2 débats qui vont arriver. Et dans ces débats, je vais partager nos plans et je vais interpeller Mark Carney et Pierre Poilievre sur le fait qu'ils vont couper dans les soins de santé. Et j'ai confiance que je peux montrer que si vous voulez défendre notre système de santé, l'NPD est la seule option pour défendre notre système public et universel.
See, next question, Rihanna Lim, Canadian Press.
What's your reaction to, going back to the notwithstanding clause, what's your reaction to Pierre Poilievre vowing to use the notwithstanding clause to ensure that those who have committed multiple murders stay behind bars for the rest of their lives?
Well, we obviously need to have severe penalties for people that commit horrible crimes. And right now we have that ability. We've got a criminal justice system where judges are able to make that determination. And that should continue as is. When it comes to the notwithstanding clause, I believe that we should not be using it. It undermines the charter, and the charter is an important list of rights that people should have. But when it comes to crime, everyone in our country should be safe. You should be able to be safe at home. You should be safe when you go to work, when you take public transit. You should be safe when you play in the local playground with your kids. People deserve to be safe. And what we're focused on is how do we prevent crime before it happens? And that's why we're focused on stopping the flow of illegal guns that are used in violent crimes and stopping illegal drugs from crossing the border. And that our plan is to stop crime before it happens by stopping the things used in crime, the weapons used, the drugs that are poisoning our communities. And so that's our focus. How do we stop crime before it happens?
If you say the notwithstanding clause undermines the charter, do you believe it's time to eliminate it altogether?
Well, we've raised concerns about the fact that it's being used more often at the provincial levels, and it's been used in ways that undermine people's rights, and I think that's wrong. And so we were looking at ways to close down its use or to restrict its use because it's deeply problematic that provincial governments are undermining workers' rights and threatening to use the notwithstanding clause for that. Undermining human rights and using notwithstanding clause to do that. I think those are both very problematic things.
Thank you. Next question, John Ivison, National Post.
Mr. Singh, notwithstanding your doubts about, not the notwithstanding clause, but your doubts about NDP polling, do you think it's safe now for New Democrats who've been supporting the Liberals to keep out the Conservatives? The polls between the Liberals and the Conservatives seem to have stabilised. Do you think it's safe for those people to come home now?
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly what we're going to say to people. It's funny that you say that. Yeah, for a lot of folks, I think we're really worried about the Conservatives. And I think what people have seen is that particularly Pierre Poilievre and his message and his approach, people are finding not only was he talking about cutting healthcare and cutting services at a time when we shouldn't be doing that, he sounded all too familiar or all too similar to Donald Trump himself. And at a time when people are rejecting Donald Trump, Pierre Poilievre's sloganeering and attack using kind of the same catchphrases, attacks on wokeism, and just these kind of silly slogans at a time when we need serious responses to real problems. I think more and more Canadians are saying, no, that's not it for me. And so I would invite you all, people living in Toronto, if you're worried now, after having turned your attention away from Pierre Poilievre, if you're worried that you're hearing more and more about cuts coming from Mark Carney, specifically $43 billion in cuts to services. And he said it really clearly that he wants to cut spending. He said where he wants to cut spending in the operating budget. He's outlined what's in the operating budget, health transfers, old age security, pensions, and he said he would cut there. If you're worried about those cuts, vote for a New Democrat, and we will stand up and defend against those cuts.
Do you think you've been naive? I mean, you tout the achievements made by the 25 New Democrats, dental care and pharmacare. Do you think you've been naive that you're not getting the credit for it and the Liberals are?
I think Canadians know that we did it, and I think Canadians acknowledge that this would never have happened but for New Democrats being there. I think people could look back in history and seen that Liberals don't act unless forced to. And there's a couple of really concrete examples. The pharmacare example is really clear. 30 years the Liberals had promised to bring in pharmacare. Literally back in the 90s they first promised it. 3 decades of broken promises. And the only time we were able to move forward is when New Democrats forced them to do so. So I think it's very clear in people's minds that we're the ones that made it happen. Dental care as well. I remember when we finally got the Liberals to agree to do it, and they said it was going to take 7 years to implement. We said, no way, we can't wait 7 years. Let's get this done right away. And now we're going to have the final phase rolled out in just a month's time. In May, everyone in our country who earns less than $90,000 will get access to dental care coverage. So we're proud of that. We're proud of it. But I don't want people to think that just because we fought for you, that that's enough reason for you to vote for us. I want you to know that we did fight and deliver things for you as a proof point that if we now promise to bring in things like a price cap on grocery essentials, to bring in a rent control that's national, to take on corporate landlords and stop them from buying up affordable homes, trust us, we can fight to deliver these things as well. And when we say we're going to respect nurses, hire more nurses, make sure there's good patient-nurse ratios, and lift up and make sure we well pay these nurses so we can have more of them, trust me when I say this because I care deeply about our healthcare system. I'm going to fight to protect these workers and our healthcare system.
Thank you very much. That concludes our press conference for today. C'est ce qui met fin à notre conférence de presse pour aujourd'hui. Merci beaucoup.
Merci, thank you so much.